And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. Tonight is going to be our hindsight night, where I get to keep your company for the next hour or so. I want to welcome everybody down on a Wednesday night. It's now just about going on to 6:30 in Guyana on a Wednesday evening. I want to welcome you from wherever you are joining us. Lorraine is saying good night and welcome to all legal-minded people. I love that. West Indian people, we have a way with words. We've added words to the global dictionary. Cheryl says good night, and to all viewers. Fellow Guyanese. Here's Dave. Welcome in all. Well, share the link, and we're going to be talking tonight. We're going to be talking about a range of issues. As you know, today was budget day. Where the government gets to present its budget for the coming fiscal year. We've already gotten a sneak peek by the government into what they intend to propose that we spend for the next year and how they intend to pay for that spending. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking about some other pertinent issues tonight. I just want to welcome and down everybody, my friend Alison from Toronto via Queenstown on the Essequibo. Good night, Alison. Deborah, good night. Deborah Cox, good night. And welcome to Politics 101. Rhonda, of course, is with us from that wonderful village of Den Amstel, one of, if not the premier village on the west side, as we say now, to incorporate West Bank and West Coast, and of course the East Bank of the Essequibo, I think starting at Burusiri, goes back, they call it East Bank of Essequibo, but all of that is West Demerara, in the same way on the East Coast, going up until Maikoni, and then from Maikoni go back, we talk about West Bobis. But I've never met a Maikonian who doesn't see himself as a Borbetian or herself as a Borbetian. So there you have Maikoni on the border. And there are lots of family ties between Maikoni people and people from Belladrum and the western part of West Bobis. So these geographical compartmentalization sometimes do not give us a full picture of how people see themselves. We have geographical definitions, and then we have cultural definitions of that geography. So if we think about a place like Maikoni hardly would associate itself with East Coast, and more associate themselves with West Bobis. Of course, I think the border between East Coast and West Bobis or Region 5 is the Barry Creek. I may be wrong, but I think that's the geographical. But geography is not always a best indication of where people live. There's a cultural definition. Our Caribbean, Guyana, for example, is geographically, physically, Guyana is physically in South America, but really culturally and politically, it is part of the Caribbean. So when we talk about cultural geography or political geography, then Guyana is Caribbean, because culturally and politically Guyana identifies with the Caribbean. So we have the physical definition of geography, but it doesn't always tell us exactly where people live and how they see themselves. You know of Agricola, for example, that is part of Georgetown. Well, we all know that Agricola is East Bank. And in the old days, Kitty used to be part of the East Coast. In the 1947 election, I think, up until 1964 when we won, and then in 64 we moved away from the first past the post system. But the East Coast constituency used to be Kitty to Buxton. In those days, Kitty was considered East Coast. So although today places like Kitty and Agricola are considered part of Georgetown, really, I don't think an Agricola man would say I'm a tongue man, you know. And even people in Kitty would at least say, look, I'm a tongue woman or I'm a tongue man. So people define themselves in so many ways. The village that I come from really is Buxton Friendship. And then you have Southern Annandale, which is populated mostly by African Guyanese who came off the Lusignane estate and settled in that part of Annandale. And then to the east, you have like Vigilance. In the old days, we call it brush pasture. And the people who live there are really not, in a physical way, part of Buxton, and so Southern Annandale. But don't tell a friendship person you're a Friendshiponian. That friendship person says I'm a Buxtonian. And even people from Southern Annandale, the Black people who live there, consider themselves more as Buxtonians than Annandale people, right? In fact, they distinguish themselves from the rest of Annandale by saying they come out of Congo pasture, meaning that part of Annandale, because Annandale is a predominantly Indian Guyanese village, but that southern part where Blacks predominate is considered part of the old Buxton enclave. And so do the people of Vigilance. And now you have the old time squatting area, they now call them the schemes. And the people live in those schemes, which are outside of the boundaries of Buxton. But they're mostly Buxtonians, and so they consider themselves Buxton. Just chatting some geography there, and culture, and identity, because identity is important, you know. On the north side of Buxton, used to be mostly Indian Guyanese who live what we call Buxton Front, going up to the seawall. And they lived there for a very long time, and some of them still live there. During the disturbances of the 1960s, a lot of the Indian Guyanese moved out, or some would say were forced out of Buxton, and they went over to Annandale. They went to places like what they call Sand Reef and Corbin Park. But they used to be Buxtonians at the front side there. And to this day, you meet Buxtonians like that, and they refer to themselves as Buxton Coolies. Well, me a Buxton Coolie man, or me a Bucks man, ensuring that Buxton is linked to their identity. You see, people think that places like Buxton were predominantly African, but wasn't purely African. Indians lived there. I would say a good 5 to 10% of the population was Indian Guyanese. I remember going to school, and in any of our classes, you had about a quarter of the students were Indians from Strathspey, Indians from Buxton Front, and some Indians from Annandale. And so Buxton, like many of the villages, the Black villages, was once a multiracial village. But during the disturbances, people were forced to, exchange homes. Indians exchange homes with Africans and so on. I see my brother from Toronto. The Toronto people are on tonight. My brother Brian Moses. In Buxton, we call him Lion. Good night, my brother, and it's good to see you on. As I said to Ronton, the house, the man, Lion, look where, you know, when you're growing up and so on, you had some bright boys in the village, and Brian was one of the young geniuses. He was considered genius when it came to mathematics of our generation, and we would have arguments to this day. When I was home recently, of who was the brightest people of the generation. And we always said that Brian Moses and we got another villager, John Cromwell. You know, they were considered the bright boys of our generation. Brian was the mathsman, and John was an all-round of sorts, but in English and social studies and history. And he could talk. He was a talk man, you know. And the consensus was that Brian Moses and John Cromwell of my generation were the brightest boys in the village. Brian is on here tonight, and I get to be the bright boy tonight because I get to talk in the audience. But when we were growing up in the village, you have to take second to them boys, you know. Wonderful education in our communities, in our villages, was really a big thing. You know, people would argue about who was the best runner, the best athlete, the best cricketer, the best footballer. And nowadays, you only hear people talking about who was the brightest man or the brightest girl in the village. In our time, that's what we argued about. We argued about who was the best sportsman and all the other things, but we also argued about who was the brightest person, who was the best speaker in the village, because in those days, you all remember, in every village, you used to debate. You had debates, and you learned very early how to talk and how to argue. Not to argue, you know, they had what you call ignorant argument, argument, and then you have debate argument, how to logically explain yourself. And as we get older and we look back on those days of grounding in our communities, we realize that by the time we got to university and so on, we were already rounded and grounded because of the kind of informal training that we had in the communities. I talk properly, girl dress properly. So you learn to talk properly, you learn to dress properly, you learn how to conduct yourself in the village. And we didn't realize then it was informal education. Informal education. And I can tell you, it has served me, and I'm sure it has served us well as we have moved on in life. Welcome down, everybody, to Politics 101 tonight. And I'm so happy always to see people turn out and to engage in discussions. Howard Dainty, I seem to remember that name from, I think, cricket. In the United States of America. If it's the same Howard Dainty, good night. If it's another Howard Dainty, still good night. But that name certain rings a bell. Alison Pearson said that no wonder they want to break up Region 4. Yes. You know, the way how Region 4 is, if they break it up in 4, what they would be doing is diluting the opposition vote. And I am sure that that is their objective in trying to break up Region 4. As far as I'm concerned, Guyana is not an island. Guyana is a country in South America, but because our customs are so close to the Caribbean, that is why we are considered to be part of the Caribbean. Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying we're not close to the Caribbean. We are part of the Caribbean culturally and politically. And that has to do with the way in which colonization operated, because countries in the Caribbean tend to follow the pattern of their colonizers. And so you go to a place like Haiti, and their political institutions are along the French line. They have a president and a prime minister, so they have what is called a hybrid system. Guyana developed the hybrid system in 1980. Prior to that, we had a prime minister and a governor general, and then of course, when we became a republic, we had a prime minister, a president. The president, of course, was ceremonial. And if you're from the older generation, you know, when you say governor general, everybody would say Sir David Rose. You say president, everybody say Arthur Chung. And then from 1980, we became a hybrid system. We took the French system, which is a nation of the presidential system and the parliamentary system, prime minister system. So our system is a cross between Britain and France, where our president is both head of state and head of government, head of state and head of government fused in the same person. And then the prime minister represents the president, or represents the ruling party inside of the National Assembly. Haiti has a system like that, similar to Guyana. But the rest of our English-speaking Caribbean, they have the strictly British system, where you have a prime minister and a governor general, if it's not a republic. And then if you're a republic like Dominica and Barbados recently became a republic, Trinidad and Tobago, you have a prime minister and you have a prime minister and a president. But the president in Barbados, the president in Dominica, the president in Trinidad, they're ceremonial presidents. They're heads of state. Whereas our president is head of state and head of government. And so I want to welcome everybody down to Politics 101. And Brian is saying there, Buxton Front was an Indian enclave, which is true. You know, you go up there, that's where our ball ground was, and you go up there to play cricket. And just next door to the ball ground was an Indian family, the Barons, them Baron people. Some of them I know are in Maryland now, and so on. And the thing is, it was difficult to refer to them as East Indians, and that's part of the sociology of villages, because you didn't consider the Barons and the Gopis and all those people from Buxton Front, Indian Guyanese. They didn't see themselves as Indian Guyanese. They saw themselves as Buxtonians. They saw themselves as Buxtonians. So the question of ethnicity did not enter into the considerations. So the sociology in the villages are extremely important. We know that Rhonda, your village there, then Amstel, Hague, Blankenburg, and I suppose people who live in Blankenburg and Hague and Fellowship, next to Den Amstel there, they consider themselves Den Amstel people, even though there are these demarcations. You know, I suppose it was because of the way in which the estates, because these villages were formerly estates, And so the estate boundaries may have defined where was Blankenburg and where was Den Amstel, where was Fellowship, where was Hague, and so on. But so much of some geography of our country. Welcome to Politics 101. Another Buxton man here tonight, Orin Newton. I know the man Bumba Ian Brian, them were front side people, but Mr. Newton was front side. You know, we were saying the other day in the village that all them Newton boys, they had one sister, but all them Newton boys, they had to be bright, because they lived in the same building where the Buxton Secondary School was housed. And so, my friend, we were saying the other night in Buxton, that them Newton boys should be bright because they live in the house of education. And indeed, they are very bright. Some of them younger Newton boys are philosophers now in the village. When one of them boys, Newton boys, they hold me down with some Rastafarian reasoning and thing deep. Such is the wisdom that comes from villages, and all of us come from villages. Even when you live in Georgetown and you scratch beneath the surface, my grandmother was from some village. Your grandfather was from some village. Town is a place that people migrated to, and so on. So we're all villagers in many regards. Blessed be you, Wendy, and welcome to Politics 101. All right, so today is budget day. They read the budget, and as we said, a budget tells us how a government is going to spend your money for the next fiscal year, and how the government intends to get this money that it wants to spend. And as I always say, if the government bring in less money than it intends to spend, then it got to borrow that money in order to fill that deficit. And if you borrow money, then you're putting the country in debt. Now, because of oil, we have this natural resource fund where we put this money in there for safekeeping. We put this money in there for safekeeping because the view is that if you allow countries, especially countries which were poor before they get oil money, if you allow them to spend the money willy-nilly, then they are going to overspend, misspend, and do all kinds of things. And the country is going to fall in economic trouble. They call it the Dutch disease or the Dutch curse, and so on. Now, there is a part of that thinking, I think, is culturally tainted in the sense that here are Europeans telling us in the third world that we are not good managers of money. And so therefore, we come up with this sovereign wealth fund in which we put away money ostensibly for a rainy day. That we should not spend the money on this generation. We should leave money to be spent on future generation. That is the assumption of the sovereign wealth fund and this mechanism to hide away the money. Now, I have fundamental differences with the assumptions of these sovereign wealth funds. First of all, the assumption that Black people and brown people cannot spend money wisely. I disagree with that fundamentally. I think it comes from a place of deep global racism that we, Black and brown, post-plantation people, we are not fully formed people who can exist in a state of freedom. And so therefore, we have to be helped along. And one of the ways they help us along is to teach us how to spend our money. And the way they do that is that they hold on to our money and they give us it when it becomes necessary to do so. So we can spend it. I disagree with that assumption. I also disagree with the assumption of money for rainy days. We have had rainy days in Guyana dating back to the Middle Passage. From the Middle Passage to now, poverty and want have been rampant in countries like ours. And so therefore we have had rainy days for centuries. And it is my view that money that we earn today should be spent correcting the anomalies that came with centuries of rainy days. You can't have 40% unemployment and you get some money and you say, I'm saving it for rainy days. No, you're going to take that money to deal with unemployment. You can't have a home in which the roof is leaking and you get some money and say, boy, I'm going to put the money in the bank for rainy days and continue to live in a house where it's leaking. It makes sense to me that you can't do that. So we live in an economic house that is leaking and that has been leaking for centuries. It means, therefore, if we get a windfall, you want to, first of all, spend the money to correct the house that is leaking. You put aside a little bit, but you want to correct the problems now. Because if you correct yesterday's problems and you correct today's problems, then the future would be brighter. And you won't have to put away as much, you know. You go to buy a house, the realtor tell you, invest in a new house. Because if you invest in a new house, it means that you get about 15 years, 20 years before things start going bad in the house. If you invest in an older house, then you will have to spend money much quicker to start repairing that house. So it always makes sense to deal with the present. And if the present is brighter, then the future will be much brighter. The basis for this sovereign wealth fund, I think is flawed. But having said that, it is not because you can spend money today that you will spend it for the sake of spending. I'm saying our problem in Guyana, it is not the amount of money we spend, but it's what we spend it on and how we spend it. The budget today is 552.9 billion Guyana dollars. That's almost, I think, 2 billion US dollars. That's a lot of money. A lot of money to be spending in 1 year to begin with. But, as I said, it's not the amount of money. But what you are spending this money on, what you're spending this money on, that is the proof of whether you are sincere, whether you are smart enough, bright enough, and whether in fact you are concerned with developing your country. Now, in the first place, I think a budget is such an important issue. It's about how much you're spending people's money on them, directly or indirectly. It's about whether you are putting people in debt. Because, like I said, if you spend more than you are bringing in, then you're putting the country in debt. You're putting the people of the country in debt. And because it is such an important undertaking, a budget should be prepared by everybody. All those who are affected by the budget ought to be part of the preparation of the budget. That's a definition of democracy, a definition of substantive democracy, put forward by our own Sir Arthur Lewis of St. Lucia, who argues that there is what you call formal democracy. That is, you have democratic institutions or institutions that operate democratically. You have periodic elections. He said those are what we call formal, part of what is formal democracy or democratic forms. The question is whether the presence of institutions, the presence of elections, whether those amount to equality, equity, and justice. If you have institutions and you have periodic elections, but at the end of the elections, and in spite of the institutions, there is still inequality, there is still injustice, there is still non-participation of the majority of the people in decision making, then you have undemocratic outcomes. The question is, how can you have a democracy that has undemocratic outcomes? It means that that democracy is a flawed democracy. And I would like to submit that that's what we have in Guyana. That's what we have in Guyana. We have democratic forms which do not act democratically, and so they do not lead to democratic outcomes. And so one must find it hard to describe Guyana as a democracy. The question that we have to ask again, democracy for whom? I have not had a chance to peruse the budget, but I'm sure included in that budget is going to be a lot of resources for the business class. The business class in Guyana is small, very tiny section of our population. I'm talking about big business. I'm not talking about the little businessman and woman in the villages or in the towns. I'm talking about the big private sector, the commercial sector. Tiny. Not only is it tiny, in an ethnically divided society, it is confined for the most part to two ethnic groups. if you are going to, in a national budget, give a disproportionate portion of our national resources to that group, you start off by discriminating. So the budget in itself becomes a tool of class discrimination and ethnic discrimination. Therefore, if you're talking about preparing a budget, then at the minimum, you want to have the government and the parliamentary opposition to sit down and to craft the budget. The parliamentary opposition would be expected to make budgetary inputs that reflect the needs of their constituency. And the governing party are expected to make inputs reflecting the needs of their constituency. And you sit down and you put that together, and you deliberate, and you come out with a budget that is reflective of the different communities. And so the preparation of the budget must be a democratic process. Something the fools like Samat will never understand. Because persons like that have surrendered their brains to a party. It is not that they don't have brains, but they've taken out their brains and taken it to Freedom House and said, control my brains. And so they will never understand the meaning of equality and equity. Because brains allow you to think, to reason, no matter your station in life. In the old days, old people would say, your brain's dying, you're rare. Today, some of our people don't put their brains there. They go and lodge their brains at the party headquarters. And so they walk around the place brainless. And they come on to these shows and they display their brainlessness for the world to see. Sanita Rampat, you ought to be so ashamed of yourself to be able to expose the giveaway of your brains to the public. And come here on a program like this and flaunt it. I am brainless. I took my brains to Freedom House. It is a sad way to live. Sad way to live. But getting back to the budget that we were talking about, the budget ought to be, we should pass a law saying that our budget should be prepared by the government and the opposition, all parliamentary parties. That's the first thing that we want to register tonight. The second thing we want to register tonight is that we are going to have a budget this year that is going to look at consolidating the PPP's pet projects. You see, when you run for office, you run for office on a manifesto. And that manifesto is usually divided into various parts. What am I going to do nationally? What am I going to do nationally? And what am I going to do for my constituents? And when you come to allocate money for the national budget, you have to be guided by the first consideration. What am I going to do for the country? What are the needs of the country, the collective needs of the country? I am arguing tonight that the biggest stumbling block to development of our people and development of our country is poverty. Poverty. In order for us to move from a developing or underdeveloped economy to a developed economy, we have to deal with the question of poverty. We have to deal with the question of poverty. Poverty is a sin. The late Shadow said poverty is hell. And poverty exists in all communities. Indian communities, African communities, Amerindian communities, the three major communities in the country. And it is what stands between an individual and his or her ability to be free. Is it what stands between a family and its ability to move from one level to another level? It is what stands between a community that is bedeviled by crime, that is bedeviled by bad roads, poor education, and the freedom. And it is what stands between a poor country, an underdeveloped country, and a developed country. Last year, the PPP's budget did not address poverty. It listed 5 principles, and poverty alleviation was not part of it. And based on what we are hearing tonight, poverty alleviation is not part of the guiding principles of the budget. Am I saying that there are no initiatives in the budget that addresses aspects of poverty? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, what is the general principle? What is the overriding vision? At the end of the fiscal year, what are we looking for? When we spend all of this money, what are you looking for? At the end of the year, the guiding principle. And I'm saying we have burdened too long on the poverty. All of us. No matter where we are today, we have experienced poverty of one form, one sort, or the other. And some of us have been barely lucky to escape the clutches, either through migration or through education or through entrepreneurship. But we go back into our communities, and the vast number of our people remain where we left them. Not because they have not tried, but because the system has not tackled poverty in a systemic way. So if you do not tackle poverty in a systemic way, it means you are encouraging poverty in a systemic way. And so what we have is systemic poverty. Constantly building a hole to fill a hole. We are constantly trying to exist today. And so there is no overriding vision in this budget about dealing with the question of poverty. I'm saying that we ought to indict the government in Guyana today that is getting a little bit more money than it would normally get and not dealing with the number one curse in our society. They want us to continue to exist like jagabats and trench grappers, like them, except that they are jagabats and trench grappers with means. And they want to reduce us to people without means. Bob Marley says some people got everything. Some people got dreams. Some people have ways and means. And all that some people have, as he said, is dreams. Some people got everything. Some people got the ways and the means. Some people got nothing. And they would like us to remain nothing. So this is a kind of budget that is aimed at getting the rich richer and the poor poorer. Let us talk about this question of poverty. I'm going to open the phones tonight and to get your thoughts on poverty. I'm saying if we can beat poverty, we will open the doors. We'll open the doors to prosperity if we can beat poverty. Our people have done a lot on their own. Our people have done a lot on their own. The lady who filled her tray with plantain chips and go out there, sun and rain, and sell for $1 pack. She's making enough probably to buy rice, greens, and sugar. But she goes out there every day and sell her plantain chip to survive. What about policies to help her move from plantain chip at the side of the road in a tray to a little shop that sells plantain chip and other items that can guarantee herself a living wage? In the old days, they used to talk about the small man becoming a real man. It was a noble objective. We have to put mechanisms and policies in place for the small woman to become a free woman. Because that lady is only going to be free when she has economic freedom. Economic freedom means that she has the ways and the means to survive. I'm saying that is the number one challenge of our time, because we can trace all the ills in our society back to poverty. The poor parent was to take that child out of school to go help her sell in the streets, robbing that child of education, robbing that child of an education which would give that child a proper job with a proper income, allowing that child to become an adult with the skills that are needed to earn a living wage and to begin to raise a family knowing that he or she can take care of that family. All roads lead back to poverty. All roads lead back to poverty. And until we are able to tackle poverty, we are going to be in some serious trouble. Well, we heard the news today that Mr. Harman has resigned as the leader of the opposition. I know that many of us in the audience, many of you in the audience, have been asking for that. And I've said over and over again that the hostility ought not to be at Mr. Harman. He did not name himself. But those of you who have been calling for a new leader of the opposition, you got your wish today. Mr. Harman has stepped aside. Yesterday, Mr. Harman resigned as General Secretary of the APNU. I understand they had a vote. It would have been the first vote ever in the APNU. You know, I have been saying on this program and other program that they never take votes in the APNU. Well, I understand yesterday they took a vote. You all give yourself a tap on the shoulder that because of our advocacy and so on, the APNU apparently took a vote yesterday for the first time. And Mr. Aubrey Norton was named as the chairman of the APNU. Today, Mr. Harman stepped aside, but we do not know who will replace him. Who will replace Mr. Harman? We don't know that yet, but we know it's the first step. So you can't beat up on Joe anymore. He has exited the stage. The ball is now in Mr. Granger's court. I've always felt that way, that this is Mr. Granger's thing. It's not Mr. Harman's thing. The question is, would Mr. Norton be elevated to the position of opposition leader in Parliament? That will be determined, first of all, by Mr. Norton being in Parliament. He's not in Parliament. But for him to get into Parliament, it means that somebody would have to be recalled, and he takes up the seat in Parliament, and then he would either have to be named by the representative of the list to the position of leader of the opposition, and or the majority of the caucus vote for him as leader of the opposition. It is said that Mr. Granger wants to hold on to the leader of the list. I don't know if that is true. These are reports you're reading in the papers, and they are speculating. Nobody knows that. The representative or the leader of the list is the person who is the liaison between the Elections Commission and the party or parties which he or she represents. Let me repeat that. The representative of the list is the liaison between a party or a group of parties and GCOM. It is not a constitutional position, as many people have been arguing. It's a party position. The party names the leader of the list or the representative of the list, and that representative of the list is the liaison between GCOM and the party. The government cannot fire the representative of a list. GCOM cannot fire the representative of the list. A representative of the list can only be removed by his or her party. I want you all to get this clear, because there's been a lot of misrepresentation of that position. The leader of the representative of the list of a party can only be removed by that party. GCOM cannot fire Mr. Granger from representative of the list. The government cannot fire Mr. Granger from representative of the list. So it is not a constitutional position, it's a party position. And therefore, whether Mr. Granger stays on as leader of the list or he makes way for somebody else is a matter for the APNU-AFC. I've been hearing people talking about the Constitution and legal this and legal that. And I've always said this is a political matter. It's a political matter. So we have crossed two hurdles, or they have crossed two hurdles. There have been resignations from APNU, and now Mr. Harman has stepped aside as leader of the opposition. We now will have to wait to see what the PNC does in relationship to the new leader of the opposition and the representative of the list. Now, the question of the representative of the list, we should talk a little bit about that. The way parties choose their representatives in parliament, by custom, it is done by the party, not by the representative of the list. Although the representative of the list maybe has the authority to name parliamentarians or recall parliamentarians, in practice, it is the parties that make those decisions. Whether it's the PPP, PNC, or any one of the other parties, they decide who they want to represent them in parliament. And the representative of the list is like a message boy. He then takes that message to GCOM. One can argue that the leader of the party, who in many regards or in past elections, most parties would appoint their leader to be the representative of the list. And so, as in the case with any leader of a party, the leader may have a lot of sway in the decision on who goes to parliament when they sit around that table in the party executive. And they begin to say, well, who's going to represent us in Parliament? The leader may have a lot of sway, as leaders do. But this notion that the representative of the list is the sole decider of who goes to Parliament, you can talk to anybody in the PNC or the PPP or the WP or any one of the parties and ask them who decides on who goes to Parliament. And I am bet they're going to tell you it is the party executive. So the latest instance where it appears as though Mr. Granger unilaterally, it appears that way. We don't know, but it appears as if Mr. Granger made the decision on its own. We don't know. So we can't say that with certainty. What we are hearing is that the executive of the party did not make the decision on who goes to Parliament. If it is true that Mr. Granger made a decision on his own, that goes against normal practice. So I repeat, the representative of the list is the link, the message boy from the party to GCOM. That is the spirit and perhaps the letter of the representative of the list. And as I said, as leader of the party, the leader obviously has a big say in who goes to Parliament. So we shall wait and see what develops further on this issue. But from what I'm hearing from opposition supporters, they seem to be saying, let things be over with so that the party can sit down and deal with the business of undermining the PPP to the point where you weaken it so that when you go to the next election, you win. The party has work to do in organizing. As I came on the air tonight, my operator was telling me that Aubrey Norton wasn't in the backlist walking around. And I clapped. I said, hip, hip, hooray, because that's what political leaders ought to be doing. But that doesn't mean that Norton can't perform other functions. The party will have to decide that. As I said, it is difficult for somebody like me to meddle in PNC politics. I shouldn't be doing that, but I can give you my views as a political commentator on what the rules and the laws are. So that's an issue that we are dealing with, and it is not finished as we go to the COVID situation is getting worse. I understand the schools are getting worse. We have gotten news of all kinds of things in the education system. Somebody told me a story a few days ago of someone on high, some big boy or big girl in the government making an order to the teachers training college that they should pass all the trainee teachers so that the government can boast that under its watch, the results at the CPCE have improved. I have not been able to verify this story, but I've heard it from persons who are in the know. In the know. If that is true, then we are in bad shape. We are rigging the political system, as I suppose parties rig election. Is this true? The government must say, or people at the CPCE must say, whether they got orders to ensure that all the students pass. It's a minor tragedy, if not a major one, if that is true. So that is a story we are following to figure out. We heard Mr. Jagdio said that what we are losing on the oil contract, we will get back in local content. They expect to get a lot of money coming in based on local content. There are a couple of things about that local content. Who's local? If it is true that a lot of non-locals, non-Guyanese, not even Guyanese by birth, who are being naturalized so they can own businesses in Guyana. So we will have local content money going to foreigners, who then will lift that money and take it back to their country of birth. What kind of local content is that? I've seen figures of close to between 300 and 500 people being granted Guyanese citizenship, mostly business people. We understand. And they become now part of the local content. So it's a way of getting Guyanese money out of Guyana through, I was about to say the back door, but this is through the front door. Is it true? The second thing that is wrong with the local content is even if Guyanese businesses, real Guyanese businesses, get a piece of the action, who are these Guyanese businesses? And how will that money that they're getting from the oil trickle down to the poor person? What do business people do with their money once they earn it? The government gives them money to ease the duty on building products coming into the country and other products. Up to now, the prices for those materials have not gone down. What they do with the money? There is never a guarantee when you give money to big businesses that they will ease the pressure on the consumer. It has never happened in America, and it will not happen in Guyana. So we're talking about the local content in which the definition of local includes non-local citizens or naturalized citizens, and the rest of them are wealthy citizens. So the local content means more wealth for the wealthy and more wealth for the non-Guyanese who figure out that you can become Guyanese, part of the local content and carry it back to where you belong. So you have trickle out economics and you have trickle up economics. It's not even trickle down. Trickle out and trickle up. Not helping Guyana. Anyhow, let's open the phone. Let's open the phone. Let's open the phone and let's talk about these issues. We can put the phone number up so that we can begin to talk about these issues. 604-9722. We know that trickle-down economics, even when it's trickling down, it doesn't work. It has never worked in any part of the world. Never. Even countries where the economic pie is big, and you would expect that the trickle will be a little bit bigger. Even in those countries, trickle-down economics have not worked. And those people in the business community who have invested in this government via regime change in 2020, they did not make that investment in the PPP to have money trickle down to poor Guyanese. They make that investment for money to come in reckless abundance to them. That's what they invested in 2020. That's what they invested in 2020. The phones are open. Call us at 604-9722, and let's talk about some of these issues that we have been discussing. Do we have a call? We apparently have not had a call. If you have something burning on your mind to discuss, some of the issues that we've raised tonight, or some other issue that may be on your mind, give us a call and let's talk about it. We are going to be debating the budget in the coming weeks. And is there a call? Last year?
Not yet done.
And last year, if anything is to be gleaned from last year, the debates in the parliament on the budget were a disaster last year. The behavior of the parliamentarians left a lot to be desired, and so we don't know what will come. It is not customary for the government to take on board what the opposition has to offer in these debates. And so they turn out to be futile debates because the opposition does not get to give its input on a lot of these issues. And as people have been saying, the parliament is a waste of time, urging the opposition to get out of the parliament. Those are areas of contention. But we shall see what the debates will give this year. But I am not optimistic. I'm not optimistic that we are going to get any better debates. We are going to get any input from the opposition into what goes on in the parliament.
We have a caller.
Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Hinds. Like your speech in reference to all things that was happening in Guyana. And one of the questions I would have, and this goes out for the opposition, and this is based on, the Justice and for All Party, Mr. Sharma, had raised the issue of the speaker being there or being there illegally. And why is it that we are only finding out now if in fact questions being raised, why wasn't that detected much earlier? And it should have, be gone to the court. It should be go to the court to rectify the issue. So it just tells me that the opposition is asleep at the wheel. That here you have this situation, which is over a year now, and it's being raised. So my question to you is, why only now this issue was raised?
Thank you, caller, for that question. And I can tell you it was only been raised now because somebody detected it. Mr. Sharma detected it. And that is not how you run a political party or a political opposition. I have argued that we should have these think tanks. We should have a legal think tank or committee, whatever you call it. We should have a political think tank. We should have an economic and financial think tank. We should have one dealing with socialists. And these are bodies that are aimed at keeping on top of the sector. Now you have what you call a shadow this and the shadow that, right? Now, the shadow person is an individual. They don't have an office. If you have a shadow minister of foreign affairs, that shadow minister of foreign affairs should have access to staff who do research and make that research available to the shadow minister. Or if you have a shadow minister on governance and parliamentary affairs, that shadow minister should have a staff. And the staff would have been able to point out to them that the infraction, in this case, with the speaker. But what we have are individuals. They may meet as a caucus, they may not meet. You see, our parliament is a full-time parliament, it's a part-time parliament. And so you have individuals here. See, on the government side, the Minister of Education sitting in Parliament has a ministry bureaucracy that will do work for her and do research for her. The opposition has these individuals, and that is inadequate. That individual got to go and work, got to take care of their family. They don't have a staff. They don't have these, what I'm calling think tanks or committee. And so Sharma spotted 1 year later. If you had a staff that was dedicated to looking at issues of parliamentary affairs and governance, that would have been spotted a long time. It's a deficiency, and I hope the opposition is going to take a serious look at it. Thank you very much for that question.
We have another caller.
Caller, you're on Politics 101.
Good night, Dr. Hinds, and to your moderator. Now I'd like to just put a few points with this budget that was read here today. That budget has nothing for the poor people. Now I thought you would have heard when the PPP were campaigning, they said they would have increased pensioners' pension to $40,000. Today that has not been done. Last year when they were giving that one-off cash out for pensioners, only the government pensioners like teachers, nurses, and so got a pension, and the same pensioners, these old age pensioners got money, but nothing was being given to NIS pensioners. Now when I try to raise the talk about NIS pensioners, you hear talk that NIS pensioners are a different thing. Most persons who are being paid an NIS pension work with the government. Because way back when it's only the government, people used to be paying NIS. And if the government, they give old pensioners one half at 25,000. They give the public servant pensioners money. Why they don't give the NIS pensioners? We still got to shop at the same market. Now with the way the cost of living is there, you same money you get, you got to shop. When they increase their wages, there is not a market that says, oh, this is the government or the government, the ministers to shop. You, the ordinary people, and even if it does shop for them, they're getting duty free, they're getting concession. But we, the poor people, we ain't getting concession at the duty free. If they say something is $20 and you need it, you got to buy it. So I think that this budget is a slap in poor people's face. Because we ain't got no relief. By the time tomorrow, everything gonna raise up more. Everything gonna be raised more. And the thing is this, you're going and you're buying the things and you're getting a lot of the greens, you're getting a lot of fertilizer. I buy some planting the other day when I peel the planting today, the planting, I can't eat the planting. So I think that we should do something on about the new dispensation of the PNC party. I think we shouldn't start bashing Mr. Norton, but we should put our backs and listen and work. And when we have gone somewhere with him, then we will know if he's bad or he's good. But let a man get a fair share, less criticism, and see what he's all about. And I know that Mr. Norton got good in him. So that is my comment. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, my sister. You know, the point Rhonda is making there is so important. If you have a vision for your society, and you start off from the point that old people gave all of their adult life in service of their country in one way or the other, and that you want to preserve them in old age, you want to make sure that they live with dignity. You make sure they can afford health care. You make sure that they can have enough money to spend. It means that you can get some more productivity out of them, even though they're pensioners. So you invest in your pensioners. And so you have to think policy. That is what I mean by policy. So, look, I see absolutely nothing wrong to legislate that pensioners should be guaranteed a raise in their pension every year. Now, the legislation cannot say it should be raised by 5% or 10% or whatever. But you can have legislation that says that pensioners must be guaranteed a raise that keep their pension in step with the cost of living. You start off with a policy that, yes, these are people who are past the legal working age because of the sacrifice they give to the country. You want to ensure that they live a productive and they live a good life even when they are retired. Countries like America make that provision for their quote-unquote veterans. So therefore, we have to begin to move to legislate some of these things. Because one of the difficult things we have in our country is where people work their entire life. They can't live their pension, and they then become a burden to their children and other relatives. It means, therefore, that our citizens who are not pensioners are burdened with stretching their wages to include their elderly relatives. And so you are pushing the society backwards rather than forward. So I would not be opposed to legislating that our pensioners or our old people, our pensioners, are guaranteed enough compensation that would ensure that they live an optimum life in their old age. Thank you very much, Rhonda, for that call. And so we have a lot that we yes, Brian is saying that the pension should keep up with inflation. They should. We should. These are not workers who are in the private sector who can depend on wage increase. They're not even workers in the public sector. You know, when unions are bargaining, they're not bargaining for pensioners, they're bargaining for workers on the workforce. And so it is the state that has to defend and protect the pensioners from the whirlwind of a terrible economy. And so we should move and think about legislating protection for old age pensioners. Those of you who, like myself, are cricket fanatics, you know, we lost by 1 run on Sunday. We seem to have been doing well today. I know we made 223 for 5 in our 20 overs, and the England is chasing. Somebody sent me a notice saying the last score was 167 for 5, and the West Indies were on course to winning. And if we win that match, we are going to be going 2-1. Rovman Powell made a century today, just for the cricketers, you know, for the cricket fans. You know, we West Indians and our cricket, you know, although we've been losing, we have still been keeping faith with the team as we are good West Indians, good West Indians. All right, we have a couple minutes to go. If you have anything on your plate, anything on your mind that you want to share with us, now is the time to do it. The number is 604-9722. Something you want to say on the issue of the leader of the opposition, or anything on the budget, anything on poverty. Now is your time to make your voices heard. 604-9722. We are coming to the end of the first month in the year, and you know, the question before us today, it's the economy, the economy, the economy. Are we going to have enough money to be able to withstand the economic breeze that is blowing across, vicious breeze? Prices have gone up. Will there be any relief from this budget?
We got a caller.
Caller, you're on the air.
A very blessed good night to you, Dr. Hinds, and the
Good
rest
night.
of the Guyanese nation. Dr. Hinds, it's amazing, you know, and something that is stunting me is our so-called leaders. Most of our leaders, not all, but most of our leaders, and I'm speaking from both party or all the parties in the country in general. How is it that they have all these diplomas and all these subjects and these bachelor degrees and all this kind of and simple common sense teaches you and can show us the citizen, the ordinary citizen, that if we leaders work together, the unity and the strength that will pull this nation, that this nation will move in such a flash, like lightning in our development. Poverty will vanish. Dr. Hinds, we have discover oil. We have over 28 different minerals we discover. Our population even reached 1,700,000 something people. Dr. Hinds, this thing hurt me because we so-called leaders are allowing themselves like petty babies, like nursery school. What's the nursery school children? Doctor, like if they now begin to creep, it's an embarrassment that they who are so intelligent and wise and should be so constructed to be an example to us who don't have their subject and their opportunity that they have. And we are looking at them and seeing that they're messing up this whole nation. Just imagine the island we found can make every single Guyanese above poverty line. And yes, still these two parties clashing. The ruling party is not mature enough to humble itself and allow take on board the opposition. Two half makes an whole. And if the two cannot work together, how can they have a unity? How can this nation unite with this petty greed and covetousness? God bless this nation and the citizens of this nation, but our leaders are the ones that are messing up this nation and then being an example for us to follow with all these diploma and bachelor degree and went to this university and went everywhere. And a simple common sense to tell you to work together, it brings unity, it represents strength. Why can they not come to themselves and put this selfish greed one side? The ruling party is in power. They are thinking about the private sector and the business sector. One with the ordinary people like me and many other people in it that live into this poverty structure area. We want air. We need to be breathing like in New York we say the knee on your shoulder, the knee on your neck. You can't even breathe. You can't even breathe. We want fresh air. Please, our leaders, work together. We expected that to be looking for them. We ain't got them in the party and part. We're looking for peace, love, and unity and togetherness. God bless this nation. Without them, we can't go nowhere. We ain't gonna get nowhere. The diploma, they say put to be nowhere because y'all use it for do positive and righteousness. Y'all do it for do selfishness and wickedness. Doctors, I respect you. And I respect what you're saying. You're a good example, Kadaki. Y'all continue to keep up the good work, man. Pain in me in my heart. I'm a father with many children, 6 children, and a wife, and going through so much of struggle. If you go in the market, yesterday I go in the market, this red peas is 600 and something. I'm buying. God help us in this country. Have a blessed night, Guyana. Have a blessed night.
Thank you very much, dear. When it pains when you hear that person's a father, speaking with such emotions and passion, you know that it's dread. And as I said, we the politicians on all sides of the political fence, we deserve the chastisement we are getting from our people. I hope it strengthens us. I hope it strengthens us. We may not be able to get the government to listen to our voices, but we can get our leaders to listen to our voices. And thank you for that call. The sisters are telling me here that old age pension is raised by 3,000 from 25,000 to 28,000. My goodness gracious. Think about what can be done. 1 pint of peas is $600. It means that $3,000 a month is 5 pints of peas. You aren't talking about rice yet. You aren't talking about meat. You aren't talking about greens. You aren't talking about medicine. You aren't talking, how are our old people supposed to survive? $3,000. And they say it's going to be a transformational budget. They're trying out 500 and something million US dollars from the Natural Resource Fund. And all you can give old people is $3,000. I hope when they arrive at the door that St. Peter deal with them. I hope, because this is criminal. And when you pair with what they are giving to other sectors in the population, this is criminal. It's criminal. And I hope it moves us. I hope it moves us to recognize that we've got to do something to stop this kind of advantage taking in high places. It is not sustainable. It ought not to be sustainable. And we have to find creative ways within the boundaries of the law and the norms of a civilized society to put an end to our misery. To put an end to our misery. This ought not to be sustainable. $3,000 increase for old age pension. Sisters and brothers, I don't know. I don't know. But we gotta move. We gotta move. We gotta move. 2022 cannot be like 2021. We've got to do more. We've got to do more to relieve ourselves of this misery. I think we're coming down to program time. If there's not any other caller, I think we're going to close off shop tonight because it's time to go over to In the Ring. And I'll see you guys again tomorrow. I don't have our lineup at hand, but maybe we will talk with the teachers tomorrow, the teachers union, about what's happening there in our schools with our children in the face of COVID. Until tomorrow night, thank you very much for tuning in, and Godspeed.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhinds6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.